Yeah, baby, we're back.
All right, we are, and pretty thrilled because
You sound it.
sure, my
I think
energy.
the booch is getting to us, to be completely honest.
Oh yeah, my kombucha has 48% alcohol. What about yours?
Oh no.
No, man, this is exciting because our next guest is someone who we've had pizza with. We've broken,
We've broken bread.
Broken bread,
broken
with this man.
crust with this man.
He is currently calling in all the way from Durham in England.
Just south of Newcastle upon Tyne.
Yes.
Well, upon the Cooligans is the one, the only, unless you're driving, put your hands together for Kristan Heneage, everybody.
Hello, Kristan.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is the first time we got an applause for our Skype-in person, which
That's
is kind of nice. It must feel pretty good, Kristan. I hope you enjoyed that.
This is the self-esteem boost I desperately need in 2019, I must admit.
This is America, baby. We clap for anything.
So-
But dude, it's great to talk to you. You're out all the way near Newcastle. Premier League season is starting.
Yeah.
Right? Are we excited? How are we feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good. I think it's exciting in the sense that you've got a lot of brand new faces to welcome that I think will change the way the league looks and the way that actually we see at least the top six operate. There's potential for a little bit of breakage in between what we kind of consider the established dominance. So that to me is always going to be quite exciting.
Before we get into the meat and potatoes of all this soccer stuff.
Well, now I'm hungry.
Let's, Kristan, we met you when in New York. You're currently in England, but you're coming back, right? So and you're making America your home. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, I should be back before the end of the year.
Okay, cool.
Sweet.
And you had gotten engaged to a Costa Rican woman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, no, this is absolutely. I'm so glad you read my bio that I sent over.
Actually,
yes,
dude,
this
we're
is all
right
true.
behind you, dude.
No, but this is exciting because you don't really.
But she's not just Costa Rican. She's also from New York.
She's from New York. That's what I'm saying. It's like you don't always get to see, a dude, from Newcastle,
from the countryside.
ending up marrying a Costa Rican woman from New York.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
A tico from New York. No comment. I got smart man. He's like, she hears everything, yeah. I mean, the food alone must have been just a culture shock, Kristan.
I am still haunted by the fact that I asked the question, why are you frying those bananas when I was served Maduros the first time?
There it is.
You asked that question once. Actually, we have her on our Platano phones.
We have her. We're gonna get her on the line. Trust me. So
Yeah, you asked that question once, never again.
all right, cool. We got instead of pizza, we gotta have maybe some Dominican food with Kristan
Okay.
next time he's in
Go
town.
get some Cuban sandwiches. Okay.
So before Premier League stuff,
Yeah.
let's focus on instead of the entire league. I've read a lot of your coverage about Newcastle. That I feel like that is your you're an expert on the team. That's my best sort of thing to like apply on you. For some of we have a lot of Atlanta United fans. What has the effect of Miguel Almiron been on the club? What do you think we can expect going forward, especially since Rafa Benitez is not there? I've heard rumors that Almiron doesn't really want to be there anymore since Benitez left. So what do you sort of expect out of him in the coming season?
Yeah, so I think to focus on his arrival, that was great. Was met with huge excitement because it broke a transfer record in theory. It gave the team pace. It gave them energy. And if you watch them in that sort of 6 months that he was there to begin with, yes, he didn't register a goal or assist, but the way that the team played completely changed. They could stretch defenses. He would run in behind. He would run for days. That was. You talk to any Newcastle fan that maybe wasn't familiar with Miguel before he arrived, and they all kind of said, the kid just runs. He just runs and runs, and it's exciting to watch. And there were just little moments where you saw that impact. He won a free kick that Solomon Rondon converted against Bournemouth. That, to me, is the greatest example of why did Rafa Benitez want Miguel Almiron, because he can burst 60 yards and leave guys in his wake with no real issue. The preseason for him has been a bit tough because again, we've seen those same qualities, but he hasn't got that goal or assist. And I think the fan base en masse are just willing him to get that first goal, that first assist, whether it's a friendly or a competitive match. They're not bothered. They just want to see that pressure come off him a little bit, because he does at least seem, I think, outwardly with his body language, like it's bothering him a little bit. In terms of his future, he's going to be playing up front with Joelinton, who's a big Brazilian striker they've just signed for 40 million, and potentially, depending on whether Bruce goes with 2 or 3 up top, a French winger called Alain Saint-Maximin, he's a bag of character and charisma, to be honest. He wears a Gucci headband to play football, so I think that's the best way I can articulate what he's like.
I mean, isn't, playing for Steve Bruce, like the guys you hear, like Steve Bruce, Sam Allardyce, Tony Pulis, there's 1 or 2 that I'm forgetting. Mark Hughes, right? Guys like this, like
Pardue,
Alan Pardue,
Alan
yeah.
Pardue.
Like these guys are like these are the guys you call in when you fear you're going to get relegated. These aren't the guys you want to start your season with. Steve Bruce, from the last I remember of him, was much more of a Route 1 manager. The old thump it and chase it. I don't think Almiron is going to have a good time in that type of system.
And I'll add this: if it was MLS, Almiron would have had the second assist. He would have had like 6 or 7 assists at Newcastle if the second assist had counted.
Right, MLS assist.
So
exactly.
It's a change that maybe they could kind of add in the future.
Right. Is there a chance that maybe we could see Almiron moved before the transfer window's open, or is Newcastle going in hoping that this guy is a part of their attack?
I'd be shocked if he moved at this point. The window closes Thursday in England, so you would theoretically want a replacement. I think with it being only 6 months, there's no doubting they bought Almiron to flip him for a profit. That's kind of their MO at Newcastle. In terms of Bruce and the tactical plan, I think personally, from what I've seen of this team in pre-season, Steve Bruce has come in and accepted and realised Rafa Benitez had this team working incredibly well. And why change that? Why come in and try and do something drastically different when he can keep the formation the same, which he largely has with that back 3, wing backs, couple midfielders, and then guys up front who do the creative stuff. That should be good for Miguel, because it works well for him as well. Because yes, he's asked to press, but at the same time, he doesn't have to get all the way back, all the way up. He can kind of hover in the final third and do things when the team breaks on transition. And that's a great role for him. I think this first 6 months, now that he's had a settled preseason, he's been able to acclimatize a bit more, it's going to be important for him, because like I said, he does kind of need those goals and assists. I think you make a great point when you say he'd have got some MLS assists last season because of just the way he played.
I make great points,
that's not
Kristan.
the
I don't know what to tell you.
I've long thought that.
Also, I'll try. One day I will as well.
No, there is a. I'm curious about your coverage, because you are a journalist in the UK, and you've also been a journalist here. You've covered American soccer. What has sort of been the culture of the not solely of how the sport is covered? I know they're clearly different, but the being in the press room at a Newcastle game versus being in the press room at a NYCFC game, like what are the stark differences in how you feel when you're in both of those kind of environments? What are the main differences between the two?
I think it's funny you asked that, because with the sort of emergence of The Athletic this week, we've kind of all stopped and looked at the situation with our industry and where it's heading. I think just because of the age of English football, it's just a lot more established, that media part, the idea of newspapers and TV. And I think from what I've seen on the outside with the US side of things, there's more encouragement for sort of fan-led initiatives to come in and ask questions and interact with the players and have these moments, even people, like yourselves. And to me, it's a great difference to have, because actually in England, you don't really get that opportunity. It's very, very limited. There are only a few even outlets who I would call sort of fan media that I could think of that have had that kind of access. And it does often produce good results. But again, there's a very established hierarchy of traditional newspaper broadcast journalists who get the access to the players and the coaches. And I think because of that, you can get a bit of a format of the way that you cover the game. And so I think fresh eyes give a fresh perspective a lot of the time.
So how angry do you think people were when they saw that photo of us with Hector Bellerin, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and Rob Holding?
Yeah.
England must have been furious. Like, who are these idiots? Why are they in this photo?
I hope that fat one doesn't step on Rob Holding's foot.
They must have lost their minds, Kristan.
I think the first question was, do those chaps have an album out? I think that's
That is the great. Wait, you know what? We need some boy band names for that photo.
Yeah, we do.
Because that's an album cover if I've ever seen one.
Well, it's starring no one at the back. The official Arsenal
No backup
fanboy.
vocals whatsoever.
So let's talk a little bit about Wayne Rooney. He's going over to Derby County
At the end of
the
MLS season, yeah.
At the end of the MLS season. It's been announced also by MLS media, so that makes it official. Everyone agrees. Supposedly, it happened pretty quickly. His family didn't really enjoy being here, but he's going to go as a player coach, and he's going to the championship, which is, I mean, I kind of take a little bit of offense to that. No.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like if MLS is the quote unquote retirement league, what is the championship? All right, it has to be beneath, right?
I mean, the guy had to go get another job. He's a coach now.
It's the geriatric league. Well, I don't know what else it could be called.
I don't think there was a question there, but Kristan, talk about it.
I think, look, it's difficult for Wayne because he's never lived outside of England. And I think there's a quote from Garth Lagerwey that's been circulating a lot lately in terms of when you sign a big money player like that, it really helps if they've lived abroad before because it shows they can acclimatize, or at least they're potentially willing to if they've struggled before because they know what's coming down the turnpike, so to speak. In terms of his return, I think it's been fairly public that his family weren't as settled as he would have liked them to be, and he possibly would have stayed if that wasn't an issue. In terms of him going back, I think he spoke last month to Sky about the fact that he was on the path with his coaching badges. He wanted to look into that. And for Derby, yeah, it's a funny deal because they've spent most of the summer talking about the idea of player development, and we don't really want to sign a player unless there's not a prospect within our ranks already that can fill that spot. And yet they've gone out and spent, I think, $7.5 million rising to 10 on Christian Bielik from Arsenal, and now they're bringing Wayne Rooney in on, I imagine, a decent wage, which will in part kind of appease this FFP, financial fair play, because he's a coach. It's all very complicated and a little bit confusing at times. But yeah, it's a tough one for him and DC, because I think it's a massive blow to lose someone like him. The curiosity for me is what's the next step. It's that Miles Davis quote I always think of. It's not about the bum note that you hit, it's about the one afterwards. So whoever they sign will dictate how big a blow this is for DC United.
Well, we have a little bit of potentially breaking news. I mean, it's rumor right now.
Well, I mean, look at the publication.
I know, which is I'm going to mention. It's being referenced by The Sun, which I believe is your New York Times, and Sport Bible, and it says Bible. Okay.
And it's never wrong. The Bible's not one word.
Bible, 100% true. Sarcasm. But learning out some sarcasm. They are suggesting that Arsenal star Mesut Ozil's representatives will meet with DC representatives next week. DC United, Mesut Ozil going to DC United. Who knows if it's true? Again, transfer rumors out of England sometimes are wild.
But he was just there, right, for the ICC.
That's right.
So I don't know if he played in that game.
He tried mumbo sauce, and he's like, yo, I got to stay here. This is it.
That's what keeps everybody in D.C.
He heard go-go music, and he was like, yo, I like this. But, like, what's our first reaction, Kristan? Have you heard this rumor yet, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, I've heard it. I mean, either way, he's going to end up in the nation's capital on big money with a team that last won the league in 2004. So is much changing really for Mesut Ozil?
Ouch.
I think it would be a huge statement for DC. It would be a huge statement. I think, Arsenal need to get rid of him. I think that's the one thing you can say with certainty. He just doesn't fit that club anymore. It's not that he's a bad player. I think the very polarizing nature in which we discuss Mesut Ozil is quite dangerous sometimes, because he's not a bad footballer. He's clearly not a bad footballer. You look at enough of his analytics and his metrics in terms of creation, he's very good, but he just doesn't fit that Arsenal team as it stands right now. And I think for that reason alone, they need to kind of come to some agreement that can benefit both him and Arsenal, which DC United would most definitely be that.
I don't know, £350,000 a week, which is what, about 420, I guess, right? 450, let's say, a week. $450,000 a week. I don't think any MLS team is paying that.
Not even close. No, that's not happening.
And that would just mean him earning the same. I can't imagine. I mean, it seems to me like maybe China's the only thing. But look, I mean, these types of rumors all spring up around this time. You mentioned Arsenal. Just as an Arsenal fan, somebody released a lineup. We know one of those charts where with the formation and the back line they had at left back they had God. At center back, they had Will. At the other center back, had said help. And right back, it said us. And unless we give the other team knives and are running towards our goal, Kristan Heneage can help block them. But other than that, what is happening at Arsenal? And how are we going to have a 7-3-0 formation?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think when I talked about at the top there, the idea of that big six breaking up, it's because Manchester United and Arsenal, to me, had a lot of work to do this summer. And remember, we started the summer with talk about that Arsenal had about 40 to 45 million pounds to spend. That, it seems, was complete and utter codswallop. There's talk they want Dea Upamecano from RB Leipzig. They obviously have Saliba, who will come in next summer from Saint-Etienne. Patience, I think, is unfortunately what Arsenal fans are going to have to accept, which is something I imagine they feel like they've had to deal with for quite a while now.
Who's Patient? Where are they signing him from?
He's from Liga. Pajon.
I think, to be fair, Nicolas Pepe is a good signing. I think he gives them a bit of width, a bit of creativity that they need. And at the same time, again, I know it's possibly not what Arsenal fans want to hear, but there's a little bubbling undercurrent of some really talented young players in there. Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah, who will likely go on loan before the window shuts. I think, and I'll be very careful when I say this, I think the future could be bright at Arsenal. I think they're starting to realise where they've gone wrong, and they're trying to correct that. Because you have to obviously preface everything with the fact that Laurent Koscielny has kind of thrown a bit of a spanner in the works by deciding that he wanted to leave. That's a big person, not just in terms of the defenders you've got available to you this season, but also captain. That's a big piece to pull out of that team and try and replace in not a lot of time. So I think they've done fairly well on the whole in terms of this summer and how they've dealt with the issues.
All right. So you've also, I always love reading your work because there's something, there's a lot of.
I can't believe you're not going on a little victory tour for Everton's summer.
I mean,
Moise Kean, Richarlison, and possibly Wilfried Zaha.
I mean, look, when they're banging in a bunch of goals, you'll see me doing backflips in here, okay? Yeah. Not just yet.
The most annoying part of that is he actually can do backflips. And I swear to God, I'll tackle him midway through and break his ankle.
I cannot do a backflip.
Shut up. He can do a backflip. The guy dunks. It's embarrassing. So, I dunk stuff into my coffee, okay?
I want you, I always love reading your work because, there's a certain level of, I don't know if it's sympathy or empathy that you have with American soccer and American soccer players.
It's a lack of condescension.
Which is that. That's all. Well, I'm patting you on the back for being nice to us, Kristan.
You're not being a dick about it.
But I want to get your thoughts on Christian Pulisic, right? He is our American gem at Chelsea.
And how is Frank Lampard going to ruin his first year?
Exactly. Let us know how Lampard's going to ruin him for us. What do you expect out of Christian Pulisic? I've watched a couple of the preseason matches, and he's looked like he's fitting in, which I did not expect. But what are your thoughts, and what has been the response in England about Christian Pulisic signing with Chelsea?
I think at first there was just a bit of uncertainty because he had fallen out a little bit at Dortmund. He was not this prodigy that first kind of burst through, and in his place came Jadon Sancho, who was, again, I think still is seen as the most exciting young player in Europe. In terms of his actual move to Chelsea, I think it's a good one for him because there's part of me that feels a little bit sorry for Christian because his entire career has been, he's this prodigy, he's the next Landon Donovan. No, he's better than Donovan. He's got all these labels stuck on him, and he's not really allowed to just grow and be a footballer and discover what kind of player he is. I think at Chelsea he'll do that. I think under Frank's Derby team had a lot of promising young players in it. Harry Wilson, springs to mind. Tom Lawrence, who is still there now. There's a lot of young, wide attackers that he worked with. Mason Mount, who will be at Chelsea with him next season, thrived in a central role after a season at Vitesse. I think Frank has shown, albeit in his brief managerial career, he does like working with young players. He seems to enjoy it more, possibly because they're more moldable. And I think that's the other thing to take away with Kristan, is that he's still at that age where he can be shaped and turned into what they need. Any summer that you lose someone like Eden Hazard, it's going to be difficult, because he was, for me, the marquee player there for quite a while. He was the one that dragged them through games at times last season, because the season with Sarri was just this odd contradiction of the fans weren't happy, but they won a European trophy. And, you know, how do you kind of balance those two off? Are you happy? Are you sad? And in Frank, they've got what I've seen a lot of Chelsea fans talk about as a Chelsea man, someone they feel has a connection to them. And I think we're seeing a bit more of that sentimentality kind of creep into the Premier League with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Man United, and this idea of bring someone back who gets us, who understands us, so that if things go wrong, we're all kind of in this together and they get how serious this is. So that connection, I think, will be important for Kristan, because it will let him build a relationship with the supporters through Frank, who, again, will be able to tell him what it's like, because he moved to that club at a young age from West Ham, having been very highly rated, having been seen as someone that was the future of England. So I think there's a lot of relatability between him and his coach that will make that transition a bit easier for him.
I think he. It seems to me like I remember talking to Jack Harrison, and he talked about how important Frank Lampard was to his development when they were both at NYCFC. So at the very least, to your point, he does seem to work really well with youth players. And Christian Pulisic, as much as we've put on his shoulders, is still technically a youth player, which is insane, or a young man at the very least. Let's talk a little bit about West Ham and Aaron Long's saga. I'm not sure if you've been following that along, but it looks like Aaron Long's agent is just out here spratting everybody on the internet. It's no holds barred.
Yes, Kristan, do you know what spratting means?
I will say this: if you hear that, you definitely should run. Not your, but that one. Aaron Long, who to me, I thought he was like 22 years old. Turns out he's 26, turning 27 pretty soon. Wants to leave. He's, I think, making just about $100,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. He wants to go to West Ham. Nobody ever wants to go to West Ham, but he does. I guess talk a little bit about what you might have heard on your end, because on our end, it seems to be kind of stagnant at this point.
Yeah, so I think it's a really difficult one for Aaron, because when he clearly joined the Red Bulls, the idea was it was about career progression, and they have sold themselves on that to a lot of young players. And they were very happy for Tyler when he left. I remember, in fact, I just read the press release the other day, and they talked about how proud they are. This move, for me, having looked at West Ham in general, I think they're looking at him as a depth option. I don't think he would come in and start. And I think the fact that they looked at it and thought, you know what, we can probably get him for about 4 or 5 million, because you give it the context of how much Miazga went for. You then give it the context of how much Tyler went for. It puts it around that ballpark. And I can appreciate why his agent is frustrated, without wanting to kind of cast aspersions on anything of his motivations. It's difficult when the club asks for then 15 million, which is supposedly what has been asked, $15 million, for a player that they don't think would benefit Salzburg or Leipzig, because that's potentially pricing him out of a move. And it comes back to that debate that I've had many a time about its value to the team and value on the market. On the market, Aaron is probably worth about, I would say, 5 to 7 million. But to the New York Red Bulls, who want to win something this season, and he's a key cog in their defense, he's worth 15 million. So it's a really difficult one about perspective and who you side with. I feel a little bit sorry for Aaron, because I don't know if this chance comes around again, to be truthful with you. And that's not anything on his play. I think he's a very good defender. He also has to go through work permit situation, which could be complex and difficult, because he just doesn't have that national team history. And I think England's work permit rules, if you like,
right?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the whole system, if I'm honest with you. I find it's a little bit lacking in nuance for players, and Aaron's a good example of that. So it's a really difficult one. I would hope for his sake, if it doesn't come off, he's able to kind of stay focused, because I've seen a lot of players get eaten up by that stuff, and the frustration boil over in other ways.
I'm just glad that that it's comforting to know that after Brexit, all of this is going to be resolved.
Makes all of this easier.
We don't say anyone.
Well, I mean, I feel terrible for players like Aaron Long because, like you said, if you're not going to get the opportunity to go up their ladder that system they have, which means Salzburg, Leipzig. If you're not going to get that opportunity, then you should be sold. And like Stuart Holden even came out and said, great defender, definitely would do a good job in a top Premier League team, is not worth $15 million. So he's sort of in this position where I guess they're playing chicken with his career, and that kind of sucks because this is potentially his biggest contract at 26 years old that he's going to get.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate. Kristan, before we let you go, I'm actually looking it up on my computer, and I can't find it, but there was something I wanted to talk to you about. There was a photo that was taken that was like fairly iconic, and I can't remember the photo, but I know that you were in it. You were in Yankee Stadium, and you were in the background of a photo. What photo was it?
That was Joseph Martinez and what was the name of the rapper? Because I don't listen to that kind of music.
Flocka. Was it Waka Flocka?
Yes, that was him. Yes. And I was looking wonderfully awkward, thinking I got out of shot when I actually had it.
There was a photo. It was when Atlanta played NYCFC. Waka Flocka is there with Joseph Martinez, and Kristan Heneage is just chilling in the back like, I don't belong here, with I don't belong here face, if that makes any sense. He was so hilariously uncomfortable.
Hold on, I haven't pulled up. Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Kristan looks like security for one of these two phones. He's like, who's this guy standing next to Joseph Martinez?
And that was great. That was a good moment. Wow.
I actually got home that night. I can tell you, I got home, walked through the door, and I had been texting my fiance at the time. And as I walked through the door, she went, "You've never looked more white than in that photograph."
And that includes the time when you said, "What are plátanos?" So I am shocked.
Amazing.
Shouts to your lady. We got to get her a gulliest shirt.
Kristan, thank you so much for joining us, man. It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for taking the time.
Where can people follow your work?
At Twitter, at KHENEAGE. So check me out on there. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, and Kristan, you've written for pretty much everything. The Guardian, The Sun. I'm kidding. The Sun.
The Moon. They got a lot of newspapers out there.
No, but Guardian, CNN, iPaper Sport, Odd Checker. Those are some of the ones listed on your Twitter handle. But you do cover American soccer as well, and it's great to see. So I'm glad that there are people from across the pond that show American soccer the respect and love that it's earned.
That's right. And thank you for not having a Geordie accent on this podcast and making it difficult for everyone to understand you.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, buddy.